Good evening, and welcome to the January 17th, 2024 meeting of the Capital Asset Management Committee. The following meeting is being recorded and broadcast through Tyngsborough Media. The meeting is available through our local cable access channels on Comcast and Verizon Fios, and is a live stream on our website, www.tyngsboroughma.gov. Recording of this meeting will be available through the video on demand portion of our website. Open meeting laws require that any member of the audience who intends on recording either video or audio so declare that now. Seeing no one. After instruction from the State Fire Marshal and the Tyngsborough Fire Chief, in the event of an emergency, there is an exit directly across from me at the rear of the room and one to my left. We can start by doing introductions.
Anthony Tenerell, School Committee.
Good evening, Eric Eldridge, Select Board.
Scott Pazurski, Finance Committee.
Good evening, Kat Foster, Assistant Town Manager.
Okay. So first item is to approve the meeting minutes from this November 20th and December 13th.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Does anyone have any comments, questions, concerns? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Abstain? That carries 500.
400.
400, sorry. All right. FY 23-24 capital projects. Kat, did you want to go over the status updates?
Absolutely. So I included in the packet an update, which I made a few updates this afternoon as well. Both the 23 and 24 capital projects. From our last meeting, I did include an update here to track for the highway vehicle, which was requested in 22, and then we requested additional funding in 23. That has been included here, and as an update, still waiting for the truck to be delivered. At this point, no anticipated delivery date.
Okay.
Going back, apologies, to the public safety communications upgrade. All the microwave dishes have been installed, and we are expecting that by the end of January, all hardware will be installed. So that project should be completed by the spring. And I did, all the projects that I've updated since our last meeting, I did highlight in yellow, just to call attention. A big one that we'll be talking about next, so I'll go into more depth soon, is the Bicentennial Field irrigation project. As we know, as we discussed, bids have come in significantly over budget. We did reject all those bids. We asked for feedback. We asked for our irrigation consultant to go back to the drawing board, include, the redesign, what are not necessarily including the nice to haves, everything we discussed at our last meeting. Just look at the design and how we can reduce it. And the best that they could come up with is $500,000. I'll talk more about that and where we want to go from here, but just a brief overview before we move to the next item. And so big update on the highway garage bays. So we did, we put out a request for design services that was released early this year for the design of the new DPW building. This will be just the shell. We anticipate the design to be done in March and bids to be released early April. And hopefully we'll have the project start in the summer and to be completed over the summer months. At the special town meeting in the fall, we do anticipate coming back for additional funding to build out the interior, which was not included in the original cost estimate. The town manager did go to the sewer commission meeting to give them an update, since they are stakeholders in this project, and they were appreciative of the update. They weren't aware that the funding didn't include the interior build out. However, that they're still committed to making this project move forward, knowing that it's going to require some additional funding on their behalf. So that's good news. We still need to get the funding from the agreement with the 93 Kendall Ave developers for the pad. And so we're just waiting to see how bids come in at this point. Or, sorry, proposals for the design service.
Okay, if I could interrupt on that
Okay.
one? Were we aware that the interior build-out wasn't part of that project? I don't remember that either.
It was the frame. It was basically the framing. At the time, we didn't even know, like, how much space was really gonna be needed, and, if you remember, it was like, it wasn't a big amount, you know, you
Right.
think about like what a building was and
Yeah.
all that, it was a pretty small amount, and it was really just the, prefab.
The slab and the
Yeah,
prefab.
the
Okay.
slab wasn't even in there, because remember, that was paid for by, the company that's doing the construction. on the
Okay.
other. So we got that put in. It was just the prefab of the outside of
Shell.
the building.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, we still don't know what the cost is going to be at this point.
For
I
the
think that we're
interior.
still working through some of the space needs. And if I'm not mistaken, we're still looking at, because we still have the existing building, and what duties, you know, what's gonna go in that building
Building, yeah.
versus what's gonna go in there. Because I think if I'm not mistaken, there's some health and safety types of things, because if you got a garage, bays where you got vehicles going in, you've got,
Ventilation
Yeah,
issues and that kind of
so-
stuff, yeah.
so I think that they're looking at all of those types of issues.
And the designer will certainly help
Mhm.
us with that. I mean, very preliminary, so don't hold me to these numbers, but I think probably in the fall, around 200,000 in additional funding we'll probably ask for. But again, we'll know more once we get the design back. And then just lastly, an update on the cruiser. It was delivered, and so now they have that as part of their inventory. I'm happy to take any additional questions, but we will get to the bicentennial field in a moment, but any other projects.
The remaining fund column, like on the cruiser, that 1450, 140, will that go back into free cash, or we not borrow it? I don't know what we did on
ARPA.
each one of it. That was ARPA?
Mm-hmm.
So it stays in ARPA? Okay.
All right.
When's the fun?
So I will go. And the town manager and I did put together a memo that we just dropped into the packet this morning, so apologies if the committee didn't have a chance to review it. But it is regarding the bicentennial fields budget increase. So not to go, you know, we've been aware of the process so far, so just as a quick overview for our viewers, this committee did appropriate $220,000 for the project. We did put this project out to bid. The lowest bid was $732 approximately thousand, and the second lowest bid was $843,000. So after we had this meeting, we rejected all the bids. We went back to the consultant and asked for value engineering. We also asked for feedback from the two contractors who did bid on the project. They did also share that they anticipated it would be a lot more, but there were some nice to haves in there, not things that we needed. So based off the value engineering, we are going to be close to 500,000. That's what our consultant thinks. The substantial change was to include in the design, or should change it so that would require the town to remove the intake from the pond in the fall and then reinstall it in the spring. So just a little bit more manual labor added. So we would need to make up the additional 280,000, which we could fund using the savings that were pointed out from the last spreadsheet in ARPA, based off our preliminary review of all the projects that we believe have been completed and funds unexpended. So really, we're looking for feedback from this committee to determine whether or not we move forward with this project, if you strongly believe that this is something worth continuing to pursue and put it back out to bid, knowing that we could get estimates of, we could get bids ranging, over 500,000, and then we would come back to this committee and decide again, do we want to keep funding this or the additional money, or do we just want to no longer pursue this project?
Mr. Chair, if I might. I thought the project as presented initially was a no-brainer. It was one of those ones that you look at and say, there's a pretty quick turnaround. It wasn't, I don't want to say 250,000 isn't a lot of money, but it wasn't more than 500,000. My concern, and I asked town manager, how could they have missed so badly? The consultants missed so badly in an estimate. I mean, it wasn't a situation where it was, 10, 15% or anything like that. This was, they came in at 217 and we're looking at more than 500,000. So they missed badly. And that is a concern of mine, because I sit there and say, now I have to pause. Before it was a slam dunk, now it's like, I don't know. I still think we should do it, but my concern, if they messed up the estimate that badly, is the design really the right design? And you can weigh in, but what Colin had said to me was that they looked at the design multiple times, and the bidders looked at the design, and it's valid. It's just the costs were off. It wasn't a matter of, somebody designed something that is never going to work, and in order to make it work, it's going to cost twice as much. It's that they just got the estimates totally wrong. So I think we have to look at it. One of the things, what is our ARPA money that was unexpended on those projects? Because I know there's, if I remember correctly, there was like 300,000 in ARPA that was left that hadn't been allocated. What do we have left in unexpended ARPA that we know won't get expended? Because there's going to be, there's still some things going on. I didn't see what that number was.
That is because we did not include it yet.
Good.
So you didn't miss anything.
I'm normally good.
So the town manager we're still confirming that, due to the way we've been accounting for all these projects have been a little bit tricky. However, it's somewhere around 300,000. So for this, not including, so unexpended, unappropriated, 330,000, which we're looking at for this year's capital. Appropriate but unexpended, approximately 300,000.
Okay.
If I may, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
ARPA funding's free. It was free. If we can get a project like this done and save $50,000 a year, even if it's 10 years, it's free money.
So they were that far off with the 217. Are we sure about the 50?
No, that's a different,
The
it's
50,000
50,000 that we're expending today to water those fields.
Well, are we sure about that?
Yeah. So we looked at that. We actually pulled the bills. It's not 50 grand every year. It's sometimes it's more, sometimes it's a little less. Like I would expect that, and we didn't have the bills for this past year, but my guess is there's no way that we spent 50 grand in water.
Has it rained?
Because we had a ton of rain.
Yes.
But the average on it was about 50K. The challenge, and I understand your point, the thing I was looking at is that's what it was looking back 10 years. If we look forward, the cost of water is going up. So I think it's the conservative approach would say, okay, what was the average over the last 10 years? And that's how we ended up in that, I think it was just under 50. Those were real numbers. That wasn't anything that the consultant provided as an estimate. They didn't do anything as far as rate of, a return on investment. They didn't do anything on that. We just took the bill, I went with Allison, and we looked at the bill and said, okay, what did we spend? So, but, I didn't want to cut you off.
No, I'm just, you know, are we ever gonna have $500,000 in free cash to do this in the future? And this is free money. And really, the answer is no. We're never gonna have $500,000 in free cash in the future. And we're not gonna wanna borrow $500,000 to do this.
So,
So if we have free money, to me, I think this is the time to do these types of projects. My opinion.
If I might, as a proponent of this project, I understand what you're saying. However, the reality is that whatever we spend on this, we don't have available to spend on other things. So it's not like it's use it on this or we lose it like we might have for other things.
I agree.
However,
What other projects do we have that we're going to save money versus just spending money? Is where we get the $500,000 back in 10 years. Buying a fire truck, we don't get the $500,000 back. And this is free money. That's my thought process behind this.
So my thought is, you know, I'm not opposed to continuing forward with this project, and I share Mr. Eldridge's concern that the consultant wasn't just off by a factor of 2, he was off by a factor of about 4, right? Because, you know, originally, when they bid on it, the bids were coming in at 800,000 plus. It's only after we value engineered it down, is it now only double what we originally estimated. I guess the question to this committee is, how far are we willing to go over that, or to that 500,000? What if the bids come in at 600,000 this time? You know, significantly less than they were last time, but is there a top line that we say, you know, we'll support this project, but at a certain point, we're gonna say, it's just too expensive, and the payback is gonna be too long, you know? I mean, because over 10 years, you have to expect that the pumping equipment will have to be replaced at some point. It's not gonna be just a one-time investment in this project, and we'll never have to spend more money. As we have to do continued maintenance and replacements of parts, that will also eat into the payback period. Because right now, we're at 500,000, we're looking at around a 10-year payback. Okay, that's not great, but it's not terrible, as long as it doesn't continue to go above that, you know? So my recommendation is that we go out to bid on it and see where the bids come in, but that we as a committee should have a number in mind of at what point would we no longer support this project.
looking at this, there was a $25,000 contingency in the 217. So they really thought it was going to be cheaper.
Right.
190.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think one of the things that we should look at when we come up with that final number is, okay, what is the cost to operate on an ongoing basis, and what is the life expectancy of some of these things? Because I think that should factor in. I would be also interested to understand, we had 2 companies that bid on this initially, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they put the bid on knowing that we had appropriated 220, right? I'd be curious if we, put at 500,000, whether we get more people that might bid, and whether we might have a different view of that. I don't know enough about irrigation and hydrology and all of that. I don't know. But I'd be curious to see if we didn't get something in there. My ceiling isn't much higher than that 500,000. That's
I
just
agree
where I
with you.
am. I'm sitting there going, if it's, maybe it's 550, maybe it's 600, but after that, I'm looking at it by saying, at some point, do we look at alternatives that are more focused in on using less water than it is relative to having a cheaper water source? I mean, I still have a fundamental problem with using drinking water, potable water for our fields. It's a limited resource. I don't think it sends a good message for how we're using our natural resources. But, you know, from a money standpoint, for me, anything over 600,000, that's like a, you know, that's kind of my ceiling.
And correct me if I'm wrong, when we were discussing this at, I think, our last meeting, that design did not include controllers for when it rains, right?
Yeah, it did.
It did, okay, oh, all right, fine. All right, that's good. I didn't know if that was gonna be extra to the cost that they're.
We should do that anyway.
Yeah, we need to, no, absolutely. If you're concerned about using potable water, we absolutely need to make sure that thing's not running when,
And I think,
Environmental terrorism.
yeah, I think there is one on the current. I think we may just need to fix it.
I think it's manual. If I'm not mistaken, they turn on the water manual.
Really?
It goes on, it's not smart, it's not intelligent where it takes the weather forecast. I would be shocked if there wasn't a rain sensor. Whether the rain sensor is working, I can't speak to that. But I was thinking more along the lines of, one, you need the rain sensor, and two, you should have smart controllers that take into account, you know, you don't want the sprinklers going off if, you know, in 6 hours we're gonna get in a rainstorm. It's just, you know, silly.
Do we know what the electrical cost to run this will be? It's gonna be some, or do we have solar energy left over for that? I know it's gonna be small compared to the 50.
I don't have the answer on that, but I think what we need is what the cost to operate this is, including power and maintenance of the equipment and all of that stuff. I think we just kind of have, we should get, when it's a slam dunk, right, when it was 250,000, I was sitting there going, you know what, it's still gonna pay for itself.
Yes.
Now, I think we just need to do a little bit, look at some of the finer items and make sure that we are getting the payback that's there.
And
So
if-
it's-
I'm sorry, that 50,000 is actually paid by the rec program, correct? Not the town?
Correct.
It comes out of user fees for sports.
I think,
It comes out of the budget.
yeah, that's in the operating. That's not supported by user.
Okay,
They don't get enough in user fees to cover that sort of stuff.
so it's actually a town budget item, yeah, okay.
So, is the next step then to put this out to bid again?
It depends.
If we, you know, as a committee, I'm asking this not just of you, but. as
I'm
a
in
committee.
support of that.
Is that what we want to do, is go out to bid again? But then, like I say, in our mind, we need to think about how much we'd be willing to expend on this.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that procedurally, this committee would need to make a recommendation to the select board, and the select board would then have to approve, because it's ARPA money.
Right.
They would have to approve, you know, changing that up, and then it goes out to bid
Yeah,
then.
Right.
But this committee would have to recommend it
to the select board.
to the select board. Correct?
That's correct.
And those guys are tough.
They are.
I'm in favor of that process.
Do you need a motion to do that?
I would like to make a motion that we recommend to the select board to put the item out to bid up to $600,000, no more than 600,000, and that, you know, it'll go through the normal bid process, using existing allocated funds, and then any unused ARPA funds that were previously allocated.
Yes.
Have a motion, do I have a second on that?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Is everyone comfortable with the 600,000 figure?
Yeah.
Not to exceed.
Not to exceed?
Yes. The only, if I could, if we could find out what this year's, or 2023's water bill was.
Okay.
Because you would hope that that is sort of a floor, right? Given
Yeah, I
the
hope
amount of
so.
rain, that should be
Yeah.
a floor of what the water is.
And life cycle on
Yeah,
the,
we still need to understand the life expectancy of the new system
Of the new system,
and the total operating costs. I'd like to see all of that.
Yeah.
Is that contingent upon the recommendation, or do you want me to send, we can reach out to the consultant and I can just?
No, I would go with, let's put it out for bid.
But I'll definitely find out.
The select board's gonna ask that anyway.
Yeah. No, no,
I
we
kind
should
of,
have
I
that
kind of have a
information.
good idea that they will ask for that.
We
Yeah.
need to have a total.
You know a couple of them.
All right.
All right, so we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That carries 400. Thank you.
I was just wondering, is there any chance, like, on this pump slab, we get that other slab for free? Like, is there any stuff we can wheel and deal with somebody putting something in? For the selectmen, maybe?
I feel pretty confident that if there are opportunities to shave off those, that the town manager, assistant town manager, they will do that. Jake is also involved in this, correct? Because he looked at some of the
Yep.
things, so,
He's been involved now.
yeah. They're pretty good at, if the highway department, for example, could do some labor, they'll do that. If there's things where we can make that stuff happen, they're doing that.
It's just not a very long list. I'm just shocked what went over by that much. Anyway, moving on.
I echo your concerns.
We all do.
Cheryl's an irrigation expert. Do.
Okay, next item is the FY '25 capital plan with the review of the town manager's recommendation plan.
Hey, thank you. Included in the packet for the meeting today was where the town manager and I landed as our preliminary recommended FY '25 capital budget. We did meet with department heads, reviewed their request, identified priorities, and this is the result. We have shared with most departments where we landed. Highways, I believe actually every department where we've landed besides the Commission on Disability, because they have not met yet regarding where we fell with their request. Happy to walk through these requests, or this recommended plan, and answer any questions you have, and any information you need before this is approved. So again, this is just a draft. We just want your feedback today. Any questions you have, happy to answer or get back to you at our next meeting.
Open up to questions and discussion.
If I might.
Yes, Mr. Eldridge.
So, number one, this, it looks like a good list. I was very pleased to see that we got to this point real quickly. I like this new process. My only question is, so this is the town manager's recommended request based on the requests that had come through and based on the numbers that, the budget that we have allocated. Do we feel confident that all departments who had requests are comfortable with this? And, what I don't want to say is, we had to come in at this number and we had to do these things, but yet everybody is upset about it because there are some critical things that are there. I don't think that's what you folks would have come up with and would have done that, but I just want to make sure that I understand from a process standpoint, there's been a lot of back and forth, that there's mutual agreement that this is the right way to go, given the current financial budget that we're working under.
Great question. So I think everyone understands the tight or the limited funding that we have, and certainly expressed their concern with some of these larger items that were originally requested, like the pumper, the elevator being some of them, and some of the highway equipment. I think what we've tried to communicate is that we do anticipate next year the elementary school debt will fall off, giving us some capacity to borrow. Of course, we're still gonna have to prioritize. We don't know what our funding is gonna look like next year. We won't have ARPA, so it'll be free cash and borrowing that we're gonna rely on. So yes, there was, certainly everyone understood where we landed. Of course, there's some concerns. One, for example, from the schools being in the event. So they do have 2 elevators at the elementary school. The one that is in question that they're looking to get repaired is the front, which is the one that's used 70% of the time. They do have an alternative, which is the back one, in the event, the back of the building, in the event this one was to break. However, if it's with the high school, it would be a different story. They have 1 elevator here. So I think some of the concern was, what do we have, and I think this committee expressed at our last meeting, what do we have as a mechanism to fund some of these capital items that we keep pushing off because of funding in the event that something was to fail? Certainly, there's another elevator at the elementary school, but as accessibility issues and optics, it doesn't look good that we're not necessarily prioritizing this one. Again, understanding that they'll keep it going as long as they can, but that is what it is. The same thing with the pumper. The fire chief expressed his concern that this is a 20-plus-year-old pumper. There is a chance that it could break down. What do we do? The lead time is the other issue on some of these. As we know, we still haven't received that the highway vehicle, and we're like 2.5 years, I believe, from the request. So that is certainly a concern with the lead time. Elevator, I don't believe the lead time is necessarily a concern, but I can imagine that, we don't know the condition. The recommendation is to repair, not replace. So I do believe that everyone, understood where we were this year and some of the concerns in terms of funding, and knowing that next year there will be some capacity. The question is how much. Are we going to keep pushing some of these? I did include in the packet that updated spreadsheet that does show that was familiar with where we have the columns for the fiscal years, and you can see that now in FY26 planned at this time $1 million.
Right.
So it's certainly something that we want to probably so that, just no. I actually will add that the police department had several requests for interior maintenance. We did have a conversation with them, and this is also an agenda item, so I won't talk too much about it, but we are looking to have a facilities assessment done on the police station and fire station using the same consultant that did the town hall and the schools, I believe a few years ago. And so that will be going to, just as an update, that will be going to the select board to approve, and that was around, I believe, $81,000. Because the total requests from the police station were pretty significant. The flooring, windows, painting. And so we landed on $30,000 to give them something to work with in terms of replacing the carpeting on the second floor and dispatch where the priority is the high traffic areas. So that should get them some. They do have some maintenance. We appropriated in 23 some like a maintenance budget. We should have, as I noted in the update, we should have some funding available there, as far as I know. That was, I wanted to say it was originally for a door repair, and then there's remaining funds in there because not all of it was expended. So that should get them somewhere, but we don't want to invest in this building if maybe down the road we're looking at a new station. So this study will prioritize and give us cost estimates to really use as a plan to move forward, not just based off of our visual inspection, essentially.
Yep.
And the same with the fire station, we'll be looking at that as well. So they'll give us a clear plan, a path to move forward with some of this. So the police department was satisfied with that answer and understood. I guess the other thing I'll note is in the fire alarm receiver was an FY26 request that we are funding this year, just in terms of the dollar amount of the request.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Generella.
In hopes of getting a safety complex at some point, we've neglected really the police department and the fire department for the last at least 3 years. Why put money into it if we're just gonna close it? I think they deserve some funding. I think we need to work with them and clean up these buildings because they've worked with us long enough. And so I'm in favor of whatever we need to do to help those guys.
Well, and I think that facilities assessment is gonna
It's
be a
gonna-
valuable tool for us to be
Yeah.
able to make a really good, decision about what do we throw at in the short term versus if it's really long-term investment, do you hold off, right?
Correct. Right.
But yeah, I mean, there were things like replacing toilets and sinks, and there was significant amount of work. And a third-party assessment might really give us a good sense of, once again, are these nice to haves, absolutely necessary to have right now, or something that we can put off probably.
But a new facility is 3 years out anyway. You know what I mean? So we need to do something.
Agreed. No, we
For
could,
them, so,
I just would love to see an assessment of that and get
Yes.
a better sense of what's really needed.
Yeah, I mean, so we have given to both fire and police station, there's been money that we've allocated each year towards that. I think to your point, it's been inadequate.
Yeah.
And, I think one of the challenges that we're looking at, the assessment was something that I pushed for, because it's really hard to know what needs to be done. And while, the guys at the fire station do a great job of doing a lot of stuff on their own, I think we need to give them another view of things to say, hey, do we need to expand some things out in the back to get some of the equipment covered? What do we need at the police station for them? They're fantastic public safety guys, but, trying to have them do their job of policing and say, all right, well, how do I maintain a building and all those things isn't fair. So
Right.
I think the assessment gives us a roadmap for the next 5+ years. In addition, I think this board and finance and the select board, we need to come up with what our capacity is to borrow. So we've got the school that's going on there, and that's on there. We're not gonna borrow 87 million, we'll only borrow, the 54 or whatever, so there is some capacity. I don't know what that is, and we've got some things that are coming off, and so I think we need to have like a schedule that tells us, because I think we need to figure out, is a public safety building 3 years out, 5 years out, 10 years out? There's some people that are pessimistic and think that it's never gonna happen, and I sit there and say, no, we need to come up with something that makes sense, and we need to look at all of those, plus, the regular funding that we need for all of that. So the thinking on the assessment was, we know it's not happening in the next few years, and they can't wait, and there's some relatively unsafe things that are there, I look at where the fire department, where they have to work out, and, it's in the bays where they're working on the fire trucks, and there's, that's where they start them up, and I'm like, they're jammed into some areas. The police have something, we have to do something. Let's have someone come in and do an assessment. I think that's money well spent, and will help us map out what's there.
David, walk us through that on that finance committee meeting.
He did, I think, I believe for the next 5 years.
There is a spreadsheet somewhere.
Okay.
It has some of the stuff that's in there, it has, so there's the floor, and there's the cap. And I think what we need to do is
So you want
take
more than
that, I want a model that says, okay, put in $2 million of borrowing at this time. At what point can I fit in a, 25 or $30 million, because I don't know, I think it's what he showed, but take it to that next step, and let's run some models and sit there and say, what can we afford without, we don't want any overrides, we don't want any of those types of things, there might be a debt exclusion, but what is it? What does it look like?
Well,
And
I would say further to that, though, with that schedule of borrowing capacity, not just looking at when are we gonna do a public safety building, but we might wanna do some short-term borrowing, some smaller amounts, if there are immediate needs, if the pumper breaks, right, that's a $550,000 item. We gotta be willing to borrow, I know we're trying to not borrow this year, take on any additional debt, but we need to keep that on our back pocket as, because your question, what happens if the elevator breaks? Do we need to borrow money to fix that? Do we have free cash to do that? But I'm just not looking at that debt schedule as when can we finally build the building, but also when can we do some short-term borrowings that might take some of the bigger needs off the table.
Yeah, and that was what I was talking about, that 2 million.
Yeah,
You're gonna have
yes,
these 2 million ones, because here's the reality, over the last 3 years, it's been artificially propped up with ARPA.
Right.
Well, ARPA's gone, so we have to now go back to a combination of free cash and borrowing to pay for our capital needs, and we just have to figure out, what is that? What budget are we working from?
Right.
Understanding that we do have the school that's, the middle school that's gonna be on there, and how do we deal with all of those
Yep.
things? And just run some models and sit there and say, this is what we think, because we've got the pumper is 500, well, the ladder is 1.2 million.
No.
We've got some things that are sitting on
Yeah,
there that
big
are
numbers.
really big ticket items. We will have to borrow.
That
Yeah.
ladder was 1.2 million when they got the quote 5 years ago.
Yes.
Exactly.
Say 2.
Whatever it is, we need to be prepared for this.
Yes,
And
exactly.
that's the type of planning that I think, I'll be honest with you, I look at what, they pulled together the whole plan. We'd have 8 meetings in order to pull that thing together.
I love this.
Yeah, we sit there,
This is
I would
awesome.
rather see us come together and say, okay, how can we map these things out? What would our recommendations be for how we fund capital projects over the next 10 years, and look at some of those things? And you don't have a crystal ball, and it's not gonna be there, but sit there and say, here's how we'd like to see it be somewhat level. And if things happen and we have to adjust during an individual year, fine. But if we can kind of map those things out, it's a lot easier for the departments to plan, it's easier for everybody to kind of understand, oh, hey, there's actually a plan for this.
Yeah.
You think you're asking of that much?
No, I think we're very capable of doing that.
I think it's a great idea.
We've already started we have that capital plan that takes us out over several years, so we've got that first step of the tool. Now we've got to marry that with the borrowing spreadsheet and make some decisions as to, or some recommendations of the committee where we think that those two fit together, right?
Agreed.
Cash and borrowing. But also, I think it demonstrates some goodwill and some, to all the departments, that we're not just keep holding them off. There is a plan, and we do plan to execute on it. And, so I think that's the logical next step for us as this department, because you and Colin have done so much work in getting us this far. I think the look forward now is where this committee needs to go.
All right. I had a couple questions. So we had talked about green community grants, because we were talking about something with the police station and fire. I think it was windows in the fire station. And they said the grant expired, or we'd be eligible for another one. Was that this year?
We are eligible for the spring.
Like, is that something, because I don't see the windows we were talking about. Is that,
So we did have our energy consultant do an assessment, a weatherization assessment. I don't know if this might be related, Kind
Sounds
of,
it.
yeah. Of the, all the schools, town hall, and then the police station. This was December. It had to be done by the end of the year to qualify for the National Grid rebate program, which was, I believe it was gonna cover 75% of the total cost of the work to be done. After doing so, there was recommendations for all the 3 schools and the town hall, but not the police station, because they apparently have already done that.
Oh. They didn't do fire?
They did do fire, but they did not come up with, I believe they did fire, but they
Oh.
did not, that would be one building that they did not provide any feedback on. So I'll follow up on that.
Seem
But
to remember, I don't know, we talked about it, I don't remember but it was, we were waiting for that. So,
Before we could even apply. Because those are I think it's every other year that we can apply, right? The green communities stuff.
yes, I believe, that I have to check, but I know we're eligible in the spring, and we have talked with our energy consultant about putting forward, a program and an application, and it would be for, what's the term he used? Basically reconfiguring the systems in the schools, because they're not, at this point, they need to be recalibrated, essentially, I believe. I can follow up, but there is something that we're looking to do, and I apologize, I can't remember what it is, but it's school-related, because that will be based off what they're funding. It's very limited, and that would be one thing that they would approve.
okay.
Green communities, that is, based off of our consultant's recommendation. So we have been in touch with him, but that's what he recommended was the biggest bang for our buck at this point.
Okay.
He has, proposed several other energy efficient upgrades, but things that would cost the town money that we would have to do something like an on-bill repayment, even if we started using some of our remaining solar credits.
And I think the way that works is you get the grant, and then they come to us to fund our match.
Yes.
So the grant comes with, they give you X amount, and then the town has to have a certain amount to match. We have to approve that match, whether it comes from
Right.
free cash or whatever depending on how it is. So we don't typically, we don't approve it first before they get the grant, because they're not gonna spend the money unless they get the grant.
Okay. It just, like Bicentennial, new windows at the fire station would probably pay for themselves pretty quick. So, I don't know what the heating bill is there.
Don't know
But-
either.
It was a conversation we had at one of the prior
Yes.
years. So, last question was, on the truck, they were looking at a Maverick for the highway?
We are open to any vehicle at this point, as long as it's energy efficient.
Okay. Because I'm still seeing
Excuse me, sorry, go ahead.
the Lightning Pro this one's selling for 52 with the 7,500 credit. So this one's probably cheaper, long-term. So,
We did confirm that the highway foreman doesn't actually do any plowing or anything, which gives us a little bit more flexibility on the
Right.
vehicle, which is good.
right.
So we're not exclusive to a truck anymore, although I'm sure probably a preference.
Yes.
But,
Depends what he uses it for. Does he deliver stuff or
yeah,
is he
occasionally,
just driving around?
a little bit of both.
Okay,
Driving around and delivering things, but doesn't actually do plowing like some of the other trucks are built out to do.
okay,
But we're talking about 45. The request is for 45.
right.
Not for the original 80.
Yeah, that was with the Chevy. The Chevy was 80-something. This is the Ford.
Right, but what they're looking at is 45.
Mhm.
They're asking for 45,000 now. Because
That's cheaper?
because what we had talked about is, the 85, we're all sitting there going, no. Come up with something that's in the 45 range, and
Mhm.
that's what they're coming with us.
Right. But this is a full-size pickup.
Mhm.
And it'd be less. And electric.
I let them deal with procurement. I said, there you go, that's their thing, but yes.
Okay. All right, as long as they're considering it.
Considering all options.
The last thing that I would like to, is the elementary school chiller repair. I wasn't here at the last meeting, I don't know if you guys have talked about that, but Left Field, who's working with us on the elementary school, sent over one of their people. This chiller's been on here for 5 years at $400,000 replacement. He told us if we do this repair, it'll give us another 10 to 12 years. So this is a no-brainer, and thank you to Left Field for doing that for us, because they didn't have to.
Yeah, that was the good news that was delivered, I think, in the last meeting.
In the last meeting, yeah, so it's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure, do we, schedule-wise, we don't need to make recommendations. We still have to talk with finance, we have to go through all that. So do you need like approval on this at this point, or is this just, you want our feedback as to whether we view this favorably? I can't remember I think we're way ahead of
Yeah.
schedule.
And actually, if I could just say one more thing about the police and fire. I know that Senator Kenny was talking about a similar program to MSBA with the School Building Authority for municipality buildings. And I believe we have a meeting coming up with him in February at a tri-board meeting. Is that still planned?
Trying, I don't know that we've got anything scheduled.
All right.
I don't know if we've got that firm.
But that would be a good
Yeah,
follow-up conversation
yeah,
with him on that to see where we are and
Yep.
whether or not it's still being pushed.
It died.
I was gonna say,
But
my guess is that all of those types of things,
With the budget,
given
yeah.
the current budgetary thing, that they're pulling a lot of that stuff out, just because of the economic uncertainty at the state level. I think it's a great idea, and I think that we should have something like that, but
But that's also funded by gas tax. So it may be still something they're willing to do because it's not coming out of their budget per se.
That's worth asking, yeah. If we
Yeah.
schedule a meeting, that's absolutely a good question to ask.
And I would think we would need a recommendation to approve this list to bring forward to the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen so they could weigh in on it.
I just don't know, do you need it now? Or is
Oh,
that
no,
like,
this was just initial. Do you
Okay.
have any feedback? Is there anything you want to change? Do you need any more information?
I'm good with this now. I would like to, I mean, I don't want to approve it now in case something comes up. Between when we do need to, I think the information is good. I think the background stuff on it, might want to figure out, what actual vehicle we're talking about, some of those types of details. And just make sure that we've got all that addressed. The only thing I'm still unclear on, and I don't know that it needs to be part of this, is there a mechanism for us to have some sort of an account that we can put stabilization, allocate money for stuff that is gonna break during the course of the year that we can tap into where, because we know we got capital stabilization, which is for capital, but I don't know if we can leverage it for repairs. I don't know what mechanisms there are for that type of thing, because if I look, I'm thinking about that elevator.
Yep.
If it breaks, how are we gonna pay for it? And I think that, there's a little bit of, based on what we have budgeted, what we are allowed to spend and what's being proposed here, there's some availability, and I look at it and say, well, can that go into either that fund or capital stabilization? We need to just figure out how we want to do those types of things.
We can come up with some options. I
Yeah,
think
for-
there's a variety of different things we probably could, but it's a matter of the accessibility and flexibility of them, probably, versus, going to town meeting or waiting till a special or annual town meeting.
Right.
And how much is gonna be a big part of it. It'll have to be appropriated from something.
Yeah, so can we figure out, like, perhaps do other towns have something in there? There should be a cap on it. I don't think it's something that should go to town meeting. You know, I look at it and say, the initial piece will be at town meeting, but doing it, there needs to be obviously some oversight. But can we find out what perhaps other towns might have for that type of thing to see? Because we run into this all the time. We sit there and go, yeah, you know, I didn't fund it, but it's a ticking time bomb.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that I have to, you know, fix it 5 years too early, but if I have that safety net of, if it does break, I can at least get it fixed without waiting 6 months to get money appropriated at town meeting.
Yes.
Because I don't know the answer to that.
I mean, one option is certainly build it into sort of this budget, because as long as it's not ARPA, and if it's free cash, that will carry, I believe it carries over year to year unless it's all expended. I believe with free cash and borrowing,
So we could actually put a line in here that says unexpected items or something like that. And it would get approved at town meeting that this board would make recommendations to the Board of Selectmen to spend that money.
I believe it would just require the town manager to, and that could be something where we put a policy together.
Yes.
Simply like that, and, you know, you would require approval of this committee, finance, or select board, or all three, per the recommendation of the town manager, something
Right.
like that.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to see what options we have on that, to do that. Have a cap on it. I don't want to have a slush fund.
Right, no, exactly.
You know, ultimately, it should be a small enough amount that it's for repairs.
Yes.
Capital stabilization should be for capital stabilization that we're gonna use for
Correct.
future things. I think we need those. But I think if we could come up, maybe if you can come up with a recommendation to this committee and, you know, whoever else needs to be part of that to figure out how we address that.
Right, but what if it's a fire truck?
Mhm.
What if the engine goes?
Mhm.
So are we putting a new engine in a 20-year-old fire truck? Yeah, we get the 50 grand or whatever. But
Well, I mean,
what happens if it happens October 30th after special town meeting? You get 7 months.
right, but what's the alternative?
Right now, we don't have anything. We don't have any mechanism to deal with it.
Right, but no, to your point though, if the engine blows on an old fire truck, do we fix it? Well, what's the alternative? We don't fix it, we buy a new fire truck, and there's probably a 2-year lead time.
There's that too. 7
You know?
months plus 2 years.
Right, so you almost are forced to have to fix it to keep it in service until you buy the new one, you know? I know, it's a horrible answer, but, and these are all hypotheticals, but, you know, some of the stuff has such long lead times. If it goes down, you know, it's gonna be down for a long time, right, before we could replace it. So you're almost forced to repair. And I think, to your point, Mr. Eldridge, you know, you set up whatever you wanna call it, a stabilization fund for repairs, and I think you would limit it to repairs of capital items.
Yes.
So that we're not just doing routine operating repairs that happen, you know, day to day, that it's really an emergency for exactly what you're saying, Scott. One of the big capital items needs a repair before we can go and replace it.
The elevator here at the high school. It's the only
Exactly,
elevator.
exactly, something like that, that we
We
have
have
on our
children in
list.
this building that need, that elevator cannot be out.
Right,
You know,
exactly, no, I agree.
Right now, we don't have a way to deal with it.
We don't have a way to
So
fix
let's come
it.
up with a way to deal with it.
Yes,
That's
agreed
all
completely.
That's all I sit there, I know you guys.
For the
are very
record, Mr.
creative and-
Eldridge had a good idea.
It's so noted.
Does this need to be a bylaw change?
Don't know.
Good question.
You got homework.
I do. It's exciting. The only thing I would add, so it's recommissioning. Retro commissioning, is that the right word? Is what the Green Communities is going, the retro commissioning. So basically taking, it's an assessment of the building system to make sure it's operating efficiently and correctly due to any changes in occupancy or or just changes to construction design. So that would be what we're working with our consultant. He said that would be something they would fund. We would see a significant savings from doing so. We don't have what that would be yet, because that's something they're gonna be putting together, but just to follow up on that, that would be what our grant would be in the spring, based on what we think the Green Community is looking for in an application
And that was the schools,
for the schools.
what you're talking, okay.
And I do want to follow up, because a question at the last meeting was about refinancing our bonds. And so the answer is, for our long-term debt, yes, over 10 years. Most of our long-term bonds will have a 10-year call redemption feature on them. So that's something that, to answer your, from the last meeting, is that, yes, that is possible.
And that's more for like schools and really big items that have long life, not, like we wouldn't, can't do it with like vehicles and things like that, because those have a much shorter
Yeah.
life to them.
Over a 10-year maturity.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I just wanted to follow up on that, and I think that was the only other thing from the last meeting that was a task for me to follow up on. Okay.
Any other items anyone has?
Did we cover item 5? The facility assessor, we talked about that. Do we
Is
have?
there, yeah, is there further discussion on that needs to happen?
Just briefly, we're going to bring that to the select board, because they're the ones that have the ability to approve it. However, we'll bring it back here after as well, just to see where it landed. But that's something that it sounded like we wanted to do? That will be our recommendation to the select board, is that we do the facility assessment for the police and fire stations.
That's not it's not a capital item, it's maintaining of capital items. So I'm just trying to figure out, is that in our purview? I don't know.
I don't think that is.
I don't
in
think
our
it
purview.
is.
No. I think once it's completed,
The
then those
projects
capital asset projects would fall under us. But for the town, I think the Board of Selectmen would make a decision on whether or not to actually do it.
Yeah, that was my understanding as well, and I think that we put this on there.
Just to kind of give a
make
heads
sure.
up.
Yeah.
Right, because it will impact, I mean, it certainly has impacted our decision for, or recommendation for funding this year, for some of the requests, but also, you know what, we're asking for an ARPA, keeping this committee in the loop, because I don't know how much you were throughout the year with some of these, so just, that was something that the town manager wanted to make sure that you were aware of, and that we're gonna bring forward to the select board.
I think absolutely. It'll result in a tool for us, allow us to do our job better, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so we got this ARPA request, we've got 300K in available, right?
3:30.
330 in available, 300 in approved but not likely to be spent,
If not more, yes. Right.
conservatively,
Mhm.
right? We've got the 500, what was it, 508?
There were 3, I think.
What was the capital request amount?
503?
503, okay. And then we got 350 of free cash, and then we were thinking that there was gonna, that means that we would need 350, so you're gonna need to be 153 of ARPA, right? Which means you're gonna have about 147 still of ARPA. I just wanted to make sure, I'm doing some quick math, because if the assessment is, what was it, 81,000? 81, I didn't want to say, oh yeah, we fund the 81,000 out of ARPA, and then we're not going to fund what we talked about here, plus the bicentennial. So that's what I'm trying to figure out how, so I've got,
Yeah, so you're right, so 147 is.
There's
what we-
147 of
Remaining.
ARPA, remaining ARPA, then there's the 300, the 300 of allocated but unspent, not likely to be spent, that would go into the
Bicentennial.
bicentennial. So if it goes over 500, then we're gonna have some tough decisions to make, because then we won't have the money to fund it. Unless we have more projects that come in well under budget. Just to recap what I was,
Yeah.
all that stuff that was going on in
Yes.
my head.
And then there's another piece to that, if I may, is the 220 that's remaining on the bicentennial field is also ARPA funds. If we choose not to do that, we now have an additional 220,000 of ARPA funds that we will have to
Correct.
spend by December 31st, is that
We have to allocate.
allocate it by December 31st?
Yeah, and then we have 2 years to spend it after that, I think,
A
right?
year after that,
A year after that?
I
Okay.
believe 26.
Right, but I think it's, so we have to do it by 2024, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, and
Allocate
then
it
you
by
have it,
December, and then I think we have 2 years to spend it.
To spend, okay.
So we can just say we're putting it into the fire truck? Oh, wait, spend?
No,
We won't
spend.
have the fire truck in possession for,
Yeah, you'd have to spend it.
like, literally take possession of that item.
The reality is, if you've got 100 or 200,000 of ARPA that you need to spend, we have plenty of places. It doesn't have to be in a capital item.
Correct.
We've got a bunch of, I'm not worried about spending all of our ARPA funds. I'm worried about overspending our ARPA funds.
Well, yes, but then can we also change the way we're funding something? Can we change something that's currently free cash to ARPA and then put that free cash in the repair bucket?
Yeah, I wasn't
You
even
know,
talking
can we-
about, I wasn't even talking about the repair bucket.
Right. No, but what I'm saying is that money movable? So we free up the free cash and pay with this for ARPA instead?
as long as the warrant doesn't have language in it that's explicitly picks the funding source for a specific project, I can't imagine.
ARPA's not on the warrant article,
Correct, that's
only,
the difference.
Free cash, yeah.
That is the difference. So
So we
free,
pay town hall salaries with ARPA.
nope,
nope.
nope, can't be done for some.
So just
Unless
a
it's
thought.
directly going to the person I mean, it's not very difficult to keep. The
We try
government
not,
has
we
made
try not to
easy.
do it with free cash, we try not to do it with ARPA, because then you gotta, the next year, you gotta,
You're gonna
Gotta be
make,
in
you
the
gotta
budget.
fit it, you gotta fit it into your budget. But the net on, I think what we need to make sure of, because, and this, I think we're good for this group, but, before we allocate at the select board level, we need to make sure that we're not over allocating ARPA funds. Because, you know, that, I'm always worried about we've allocated it, but it's not going to be spent. I think, so for all the ones that we want to tap into, we need to close those out and get that money back into, we're gonna need that audit in there for ARPA, because I think what we're talking about here is, we're gonna need, 153,000 from ARPA funds to fund the capital projects. We're gonna need another 300 from ARPA for the bicentennial. And then we're gonna need 81 for this facility assessment. So we just need to make sure that we've got all of that money. If I'm not mistaken, if I do 250 for bicentennial irrigation plus
So now we're at
153 plus the 81, right? That's 484.
what's the 153?
153, that's what we're gonna
That's
need
what
to
we
fund the
fund-
capital
Right, right.
plan.
Right.
Because there's 350
Yep,
coming from
yep.
free cash,
Yep,
153 from ARPA.
Right.
We can work through that, but 250 for additional on the
Bicentennial.
irrigation, and that only brings it to 500,000. And then we got the 81 for the facility assessments, if I'm not mistaken, that's $484,000.
Yes, it is.
So we've got a little bit of buffer in there. If we have 330 that's been unallocated, and then we have 300 that's not going to be spent, but we're gonna need to make sure before we do any, before we approve any more ARPA funds at the select board level.
Yes.
So I think our recommendation could be that so long as the funds are available, use it.
Yep. Agreed.
Does that make sense? You're a numbers guy.
Oh, we got too many numbers going on there.
And that's why I think if they can pull that together, if
Yeah.
you can, if you can work with David and Colin to say, these are the exact numbers, this is the audited ones. If we have projects that have allocated but unspent ARPA funds, close them out. If it's not done, obviously you can't do that, but close it out and let's get it back into the ARPA and let's see what that ARPA fund looks like, because if it's less than 484, we have a potential challenge there. But the reality is, if we go up to that 600,000 on bicentennial, that number becomes 584, and now I don't have quite as much buffer in that ARPA.
Correct.
Is there a minimum borrowing we have to do? If we, let's say we decide we absolutely need to borrow 30 grand. Is there a number that we wouldn't borrow?
That's a finance committee question.
We're in trouble then.
I don't think,
Probably just isn't,
it's probably not worth it.
right, because I mean, there's probably fees associated with,
So what is the minimum borrowing?
We have to understand what the recommended is, but my guess is you're not gonna borrow less than 100,000
Okay.
at a bare minimum. David and the other folks may come up with a different number, but just for argument's sake, I feel very confident that it's not less than 100,000.
Okay.
Because it's better for us to find that money elsewhere.
That was my question. Yep. Okay.
We have enough stabilization accounts out there, we could scrounge up 30,000 from something.
Right. Right. If that's what it takes to get bicentennial done, then yeah, we could.
Oh, yeah, no, I think it's just a matter of making sure that we're not, because in addition to that, what I would like to do is, this is just what we've been given. Well, we still want to have, I would like to see us, if we can get enough in free cash, to have a couple 100,000 going to capital stabilization, because we're still kind of behind on some of those things as well. I think we're lower on capital stabilization, because I think we delayed putting money in last year, and I think that there was an issue on the warrant the year before, so I think we're only at like 600,000, when we should be at close to $1 million by this point.
it's about 625,000 as of last June, June 30th.
And what are those funds used for? The stabilization fund?
We have capital expenditures, so like what we might sit there and say, okay, I have 350 from free cash that I can spend, I have 300 from borrowing or ARPA, and I have 625 from capital
From
stabilization.
capital stabilization.
It's money for us to use towards capital, but, you know,
We need to
the
build it up.
thinking, as we've been trying to build this up, was, I got that $1.2 million pumper, I know I don't wanna take it all in one fell swoop. If you can save a couple $100,000 each year, you build up your nest egg for these things that are inevitable, and then
Absolutely.
you lower your borrowing.
Correct. Yep. Nice.
But we've run into some of these logistical challenges in getting that money in there. Sorry, I have to do the numbers.
No, I was trying to follow you along numbers, but it almost looked like you were counting the 153 twice, but I think you were doing two separate calculations. So we'll have to put our heads together and look at that.
We can confirm on our end too.
We can do a nice little spreadsheet.
Love spreadsheets.
Better than this one?
Far better than what I have.
All right. Any other items?
That's all I have.
All right.
Motion to adjourn.
When's our next meeting?
Next meeting.
Is that on there?
I don't know. That's the agenda item. It says,
Yep.
when's our next meeting? I don't have the
Okay.
answer. Probably February 14th,
Yep, I have
It
February
is.
14th at 6 PM.
which is Valentine's Day, just for all you folks.
Yep.
That's how I remembered.
Does that work for everyone? Is that?
What day of the week?
We've got it on the calendar.
That
a
is
Wednesday.
Wednesday?
We've already got it on there. Yep, that works for me.
It's also Ash Wednesday, just in case anybody's curious. 6 PM at Town Hall?
Mhm.
Okay. That works for me.
Neat.
Now I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Oh, I wanted to do it.
All right, you do it.
I'm second.
All in favor, second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are done.